Welcome to the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Barton. Today we're talking with Chef Malcolm Craig. He runs a pie shop in the Queen City that's turning heads and winning praise across Saskatchewan. It's there that he creates hearty, mouth-watering meat pies informed by a traditional English style. It goes without saying that everything coming out of his shop pairs really well with our beer. Chef, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me today.
How's it going?
Pretty good. I've been a busy week already, so a pint of beer is going down well.
So today we're going to drink IPA.
Yep.
And it was your choice.
Yep, it's one of my favourite beers. Since the whole kind of craze of craft beers kind of took off over kind of like the last decade, IPAs have really kind of stood out for me because IPAs back home in the UK are nowhere near as punchy as the IPAs that come through with the craft. So I really enjoy a good punchy, hoppy ale, and this is doing it for me.
Well, let's take a sip, take a sniff, and I want you to tell me what you think first.
What I think first?
Yeah. I guess we should say this is the Rebellion IPA.
It is the Rebellion IPA. Do you have another selection of other ones then to try?
Not today, but we do usually have IPAs coming in.
I'm messing with you.
Oh, have you tried our Golden Crush?
I have not.
It's coming up this summer.
Okay.
It's killer.
Okay.
Session IPA. Yeah.
The double IPA that you guys were doing before was outstanding. Like, this is my go-to whenever I see it in a pub. This is my go-to. But I like it because it has that nice, that hoppy citrus punch to it without being too overpowering. But then I like the next step up with that double IPA where you get that full-on, kind of almost clears your nose of everything because of the hops and the citrus that's coming through on it, right? Yeah. But this is a good one. It's got a good nose on it. It's not too overpowering. And it's a nice kind of light IPA, I would say.
I don't get a lot of sweet on this.
Not a lot of sweet. It's definitely more bitter, but not anywhere near as bitter as some of the bitters that we get at home in England. And I think that's why I like it, because it's not too far over. Some of the bitters, like you say, can taste a little sweet, almost nutty, without actually being any nuts in it.
It doesn't melt your face.
No, it's certainly not making me wince. That's for sure.
Do you remember the first time you drank an IPA?
Yeah, many moons ago. I was probably, well, the drinking age is a lot younger in the UK, so I probably think my first experience of a British IPA probably would have been about 14, I guess. 14 or 15, or probably shouldn't say that on record, but yeah. I was one of those kids that looked a lot older than they were at school. So I was the kid that was given a bunch of cash and told to go into the liquor store and bring back this, and I was given a shopping list of stuff to bring out. At 14, yeah.
I did the same thing, as I was the first guy with a beard.
Yeah, it's always the way.
Maybe I should edit that out, I don't know.
It's too late now. What are they going to do? It still makes me laugh now, though. On the actual day of my 18th birthday was the first time I was ever carded. That was the first time someone actually said, "Oh, have you got any ID on you?" Like, well, yeah. And then they're looking at me going, "Damn it! Today you're 18." Yep. But you've been coming here for... Yep, I have. Thanks for all the vodka. Yeah.
One thing I think that comes up for me with our IPA, this particular IPA, is it always tastes better on the second cup.
I would agree. Like you were saying about the session IPA that might be coming up later this year, I like to session this. And I get down on it pretty good, but I find the second and the third one, it just kind of mellows out a little more. Like the first one can be a little harsh, usually by about the first half a pint sometimes, but by the time you get the second and third one going down, it's mellowed out pretty good. Mind you, I can't drink anything else after I've had certainly these IPAs, but other IPAs as well, because nothing else tastes the same after a good IPA, and that's a good sign of a good beer as far as I'm concerned. Is that if you can't taste anything else after that, then the beer's working for you. Just don't pass out.
What kind of food would you pair with this beer?
Well, pies, obviously, being who I am and what I do now for a living. A good fish pie, or even a nice piece of fish. I did a really nice piece of salmon on the weekend, and I actually had a couple of the cans of the Rebellion IPA in my fridge, which actually paired very well with the salmon that I had done, and then with the sriracha, the dust that I had just sprinkled very lightly over the top. Traditionally, an IPA, we would have, if we couldn't get a Cobra beer or a Kingfisher in an Indian takeaway, then an IPA definitely would have been something that I would have picked up on, just because the flavours, they just marry so well with each other. It's great with cheese too. Not that you can eat cheese, of course, but if you're having a cheese pairing night, then work your way through some of the lighter beers and then build yourself up, much like you would do with a wine, and finish one or two of the cheeses with a nice IPA, with a nice mature white cheddar, or even a smoked applewood cheddar. It's gonna give you sounds of heaven.
I get the sense that you've thought a lot about beer for many years paired with food. Maybe I'm being presumptuous, but when I first came to know of you, it was through Beer Brothers. Through the Beer Brothers menu, I was going after the daily specials. I was looking at the menu and seeing that you had main course dishes paired with beer. And it was, to me, at the time, revolutionary for Regina. I hadn't seen that before. And it kind of got me out of my comfort zone. It challenged me to try new beers. And I always wanted to see what new food you were figuring out. And I liked that. I liked that idea, that philosophy. And I think it pushed me towards craft beer.
The inspiration actually came from a long, passionate love affair with beer, to be honest with you. And then being a chef, there was also that background in there too that kind of helped marry those two ideas together. And then when the guys from Beer Brothers approached me when I was the chef at the Willon Wascana, and they approached me about taking over the position for executive chef at the Beer Brothers, it seemed like the most logical step for me to take and put my two sides of my life together and have them in that unique partnership of food and beer and paired, but not just paired, actually having and using the beers in the dishes that were actually being prepared. So then the beers that you were actually using in your pies, for example, or some of the curries like that we were doing there as well, fish and chips, for example, the beer batter on the fish and chips. Sometimes that would change what beers we were using in that, but it was always paired with a nice crisp light lager of some sort or a tank house ale, depending on, like I say, what we were using on that. So it just seemed the right way to go, to make sure that we were, like you say, staying ahead of the game and just giving people different things to try, and maybe sometimes putting people out of their comfort zone, but also making them think differently about the different craft beers that are out there and the different beers from around the world. You can't go wrong with it, right? It's
I remember your blueberry ketchup.
Yep, we used to do it. And there you go, something else. Although the ketchup base, we never used to actually use beer in it to get it going, just because of the way beer reacts when heated. It can go very, very bitter. So we would not put any beer into the ketchup. Sometimes we would infuse the ketchup with beer at the end, but only very little. I think probably one of my favourite dishes that we used to do there that actually used to use a lot of beer in it. We used to do the apple beer bacon, which we used to make in-house.
Yeah.
And we would brine the pork loins with Ephemere apple beer.
I know it.
And that was just phenomenal. When it was on point, it was just phenomenal.
How long ago did you open up the pie shop?
The pie shop itself has been open, well, it will have been open 2 years this June. Yeah. We started the business from the house. Yeah, my little house. We said, oh, okay, we'll give it a try and see how well it goes on. And yeah, that got tired very quickly. I think we were 2.5 months at the house before we realised that it's got bigger than we probably anticipated right off the bat. So we had to look for somewhere pretty quick. So that was the March of 2016. And then by the June of 2016 was when we took over the shop space down on Sass Drive.
And response, people have been just stampeding for these pies.
Yeah, we have weeks where we can't keep anything on the shelves, and we keep taking on new accounts for one thing or another. Like the co-op now is on board, so we're doing the Sherwood co-ops, but we've still managed to keep and maintain our smaller accounts that are across Regina too. So places like Italian Star Deli. Carlo was a huge champion of mine right from the get-go. Like he was the first guy to start taking my pies, and
that's where we pick ours up. My wife and I both work downtown. We'll head over to Italian Star and pick up your pies.
Yeah, and he's taken the pies since that very first time when I approached him in 2015 about this is what I'm doing, this is how we're thinking of making it work. Would you be interested? And he shook my hand and said, fuck yeah, bring them in. We'll do what we can, and if they go over very well, then we'll keep getting them. So they put in a standing order, and 2 years later we're still doing the same thing, and they're still very happy with what we're doing.
So how the hell did you end up here?
Well, it's kind of a long, sordid kind of story. It all started when
Just the juicy bits.
Just the juicy bits, okay. Well, I guess it kind of started in 2002. I didn't want to change my career path. I just wanted a change of scenery. So I ended up working in a small cafe in a village called Virginia Water, which is just outside of Windsor, London. And that's where I met Sarah. I was one of the chefs in the kitchen who was hired just to come in and help over a period of time while they were looking for more staff, and I ended up staying. And then got to know Sarah very well.
Stole your heart.
Stole my heart. Yeah, stole my heart. And then, so as one thing led to another, before I knew it, we were just stood in the line at Canada House in London, waiting for Sarah's papers to be finished and stamped so that she could come to Canada, Saskatchewan, to start her internship at Rawco Radio. And the girl behind the counter lifted up this huge book. It must have been like 6 or 7 inches thick, and said, so what does he do? Does he want to go with you? As I'm waiting behind her, and she turned to me and said, well, do you? Sure, I said, let's go for a year and see what happens. Yeah, kind of went from there. She basically rubber stamped all the papers that needed to be filled in and said, okay, I've stamped it, you just fill these in and bring your passports.
Same time for both.
At the same time for both of us, yeah.
It's kind of a shit or get off the pot moment.
Basically, yeah. So we got back to the restaurant, and I handed my notice in and said, yeah, I'm gone in a month. What? Yep, we're off to Canada.
Now the rest is history.
Now the rest is history, and that's how we ended up here.
That's awesome.
It is and it isn't.
When it's this kind of weather.
Well, it was minus 40 something when we stepped off the plane, and back then you literally stepped off the plane and had to walk across the runway to get into the building. It really wasn't that big, and the first thing Sarah remembers coming out of my mouth was, what the fuck have you brought me to? Because I'd never experienced cold like that before. I mean, I've been in and out of walk-in freezers most of my working life, right? But
it's colder than a walk-in freezer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you step off the plane and everything in your nose is crystallized straight away, and you spit and it bounces and shatters.
Well, let me share this observation with you. What you're doing, I think, it's hard work, but what it's doing is changing the face of the city. It's not just making people fill their bellies and give them something tasty to eat. It's actually helping people think differently about what we can do with food, what we can do with beer, and I feel like it's a little gem, a little jewel that we get to have Chef Malcolm meat pies in the city.
Well, that's
People
awesome.
get to, it makes them think different.
Thanks for that.
Last week in the tap room, one of my buddies that I used to work with in government, he says to me, he's like, I went to the tap room, I brought my friends from Winnipeg, they didn't know this thing existed. He goes, we went on a tour, we had a great time with the live music, and then he goes, and we had Chef Malcolm's meat pie, and he's like, it was the best, and he's like typing in all caps, he's like, it's the best. It's awesome. And I'm like, well, did you know he's English? And he goes, oh, well, that just explains it.
And he's from Winnipeg?
He's from London.
Oh, right, okay.
But his friends, he brings his friends from Winnipeg.
Friends in, right.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, I guess you'd know what a proper English
So was
pie.
that last Friday then?
Yeah.
So he'd had the fish, cheese and potato pie?
Yeah.
Good.
And I think he would be an authority.
Awesome. That's great.
Okay. Join us next time when we'll be talking with Parker Wilfong. He's an award-winning home brewer and craft beer expert. We're going to be talking with him about the upcoming Cask Festival and his specialty cask ales. If you want to find the latest news about Rebellion Brewing, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Untappd. Thank you for joining the Rebellion. Thank you, Chef.
Thanks for having me.